Are you aging like a fine wine? Are you aging confidently? Do descriptive words like simpler, deeper, wiser, kinder, better, are they words that you would use on a given day to describe how life is unfolding for you? I've received many different kinds of responses to those questions. And what I did was I said, okay, what would be in there top of mind for persons that I could sort out and figure out ways in which to assist? And that's where I've come to understand about navigating shift, creative expression, freedom, and flexibility as ways in which to answer those questions. At the same time, figure out what are ways to weave them together to live a legacy life. And in doing so, I'm able to offer different perspectives, different insights that might be of value to you. So, what I've done is for each concept, I've provided a based framing, a long paragraph to help you understand what each of these concepts are about based on my conversations with those in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. And then I've added some personal stories and stories from those I have chatted with. So, to get started, one of the things to remember about navigating shift is that shift is another term for the word change. Now, I'm not a great believer in the use of change because change for me tends to be what's external, it's what's interacting on you. And what you do is that you shift as a result of that change. In other words, you go through some kind of transition. And therefore, it becomes really important, like um, that fine wine, giving it time, is to learn what it means to manage and be adept at adapting and adopting to that change that's around you through this shift. And what happens is that there's these ongoing significant shifts in your life, living your life, that are going to happen to you, and they may be related to work and family and relationships and personal identity, like, well, retirement for some. I didn't take that mantle on, but it's there. Becoming an empty nester, again, something I didn't take on. I'm a solo ager, and I don't have the family that are directly here. And so I take on life with that solo aging banner. But there's also those shifting health and wealth dynamics that are happening to us. And therefore, being able to navigate shift because of these events in our lives, developing the skills and practices to navigate them under the banner of aging confidently, this notion of simpler, deeper, better, wiser, kinder becomes really important. They underpin what is taking place. And all of this is to help set up living a legacy life. Now, there's a lot more that one can go into in terms of navigating shift, and that will be made available through other videos on the channel. So I encourage you to come back and dive in deeper into this navigating shift. But there is something of importance that I want to share with you now. And it's around this whole idea of these three kinds of shifts. There's course corrections, daily adjustments, and pivot requirements. Now, each one of them has a certain level of intensity associated with them. The course corrections is as you're moving along and you're undertaking your skill application, you're figuring out steps and strides that go with it, the paths that you're going on. Sometimes there is a course correction. It's a little bit different than the pivot. Pivot means you're doing a major movement. So you might be at 0 degrees, going to go to 90 degrees, 180 degrees. Whereas a course correction, you might be doing, okay, I'm going to do 10 degrees, maybe 20 degrees. So these two elements are playing themselves off against each other. When you're making that pivot requirement, there is a major shift that's going to take place there. So I want to acknowledge that with you. But there's also daily adjustments. Each day when I get up, I'm making slight little adjustments to what the day is about. And it may mean shifting things from a morning to an afternoon or vice versa. So I find it kind of interesting as I link it to the weather. So today it's snowing again. Therefore, some of my activities outside, walking the dog, I have to think through a little bit more about some of that preparation and where I'm going to go with it. But let me give you another example. Miriam is a beautiful 60-year-old who is looking at this sense of retirement, but yet at the same time going, I'm not quite sure I want to go into full retirement. Maybe a side hustle might come in handy. So we've had some conversations about that, and she has some really beautiful skills, artistic skills that she wants to bring forth. And we had a conversation. Well, does that mean you're doing a course correction or a pivot requirement here? And she says, probably is more like a daily adjustments because I just want to do what it is that I have been doing, but finding a way in which to just adjust each day. I want to interact with young persons, teenagers, and help them to develop their artistic skills. I said, well, that's honorable. That's great. Anywhere in particular? And she mention about, from a nature point of view, drawing trees, drawing forests. And I went, oh, that's kind of interesting because that links to one of my legacy projects. And that got us going and chatting a little bit more. So she wasn't making a major shift. She was making a shift out of her full time work more into her what personal values, her really keen interests. And so we've had some conversations along the way, and I'm looking forward to seeing what actually happens. And I've left a little bit of a challenge with her, which is, do you think we could get some drawings that might go in a book that I'm wanting to publish in March of 2025? And she says, we'll see. And I said, great, let's see what takes place. So another one that I want to look at was creative expression. Again, you can pause the video or read this. And I wanted to share some thoughts with you, link it to some stories. And also, I've got a really great insight for you, something I have been using for 30 some years now when I finally figured it out, got introduced to it. And this whole notion of creative expression is using the imagination and the skills to create. And I think of creativity, innovation. Creativity is coming into something that you can create. Innovation is taking that idea out and using it in different ways. We find that a lot in our work experience. And again, you may be moving into something a little bit different, or you may be continuing your career. And this notion of imagination and skills to create becomes really important. But I also like the imagination component because it just keeps me mentally and emotionally present in what it is that I'm doing. And on other videos, I've mentioned I have my doodle pads that are down there by my rocking chair. And I was there last night doodling away, getting ready to present an article on LinkedIn. And I just thought that, oh, it's time to doodle. And I came up with a different approach to what it is I want to share. And I went, oh, right, creative expression. This is kind of neat. So you're looking for something that's meaningful. It may even be unique. I don't know where you are with what you want to creatively express, but you can do that through art and writing and music, gardening. Hey, situational solving. Maybe there's some things you want to do with friends around some situations you find yourself in. You might lean into advocacy work of some kind. But what's happening here in this creative expression is that there's some really vitality associated with the reflection in and on what's going on. That is something that I have found to be of great value to me, this reflection in, reflection on. And it's shown up in my journals. And I have a legacy journal that I promote, and I have some nature based ones as well, so that you can capture those thoughts and emotions and life experiences to figure out the evidence that you have to lean into your legacy project, your stories, your contributions. And when you get an opportunity to link all of this together with that legacy about those useful whats you want to gift others so that they can learn from you, that time, effort, and money, then creative expression, finding ways in which to bring that forth, is so valuable. But underlying all of this, the foundation of the building, the seedbed of your garden, is to continue to grow personally. When I went back to university in the early 80s, having just spent 4 years traveling, I came across something called mind mapping, Tony Bazan. And it really helped me to understand that I was a visual learner. And therefore, I started to develop my own visual language, and I kept working with it as I was going through university. And in the mid 90s, when I was playing around with my adult education learning, I came across a book by Howard Gardner. It was about frames of mind, the theory of multiple intelligences. And I said, this sounds kind of interesting. And I dove into it. And what it did was very much reconfirm this whole idea about me and visual learning, but it opened up so much more that I actually took this work and started to create my own model of it, which I called the learning molecule. And maybe another day I'll share it. But for here, what I want to do is just emphasize that there's these five core: linguistic, logical, mathematical, spatial, body kinesthetic, and musical. Really, what it's about, linguistics, is the use of words, and you're hearing things being said and you pick it up. The logical, mathematical is that you can follow step by step. Numbers are okay for you, you can play with them. Spatial or visual, I really pick up on that one. And sometimes you may even notice I look up and look away. And in my imagination, I have these whiteboards that I play with, and I'm writing or I'm looking for my lists or my comments. Sometimes I'll look off to the sides as well. The body kinesthetic is getting, you have to get involved with it. You've got to use your hands, you've got to move and make it happen. Musical intelligence is you pick up on music and the rhythm. This is one that I attempted to strengthen a bit more for myself. I have the other ones, but it was musical. And so I went into drum circles, and then I got into a group, and we would go out and play in open theaters, or sometimes we went to events, and I always had the big bass drum. And it was kind of a fun way for me to get to understand that musical intelligence. Then there was the interpersonal and intrapersonal. Interpersonal as relationships with others, adventure together, and intrapersonal, which is about the unique journey. These two actually led into Goleman's work around emotional intelligence. And that was kind of an interesting progression to see that happen. And then in the mid 90s, Gardner added naturalistic intelligence because there's a lot of people who are understanding plants and trees and becoming biologists and conservationists. And it felt like there was another intelligence there. Since then, existential intelligence, which is looking at it from a holistic point of view and going out into bigger meta level understanding. The pedagogical, my apologies, this notion of the studying of educating and learning. And then there's this whole digital or technological intelligence that certainly coming out. Some people get it and just move through it quickly. Others have to work at it just a little bit more. Now, I've used this work in community development work when I was in Ethiopia and helping leaders and community workers to develop approaches of how to interact with communities. And therefore, we were doing it. How might they understand how persons learn, and how might they connect their educating approaches with it, which is an underlying storyline with my work and my writing. But also, for my own self, using these, I've come to understand, and I do my best to improve each one of these. The digital intelligence is, well, you're finding me here on YouTube shooting videos all the time, editing them, attempting to learn how to become better at it. Some of you might take on that as well, and I'm going to have another video series around content and the creation of it, and what media channels would you use. So I'm doing what I can to learn about how to bring all of these together. That intrapersonal, that was one around emotional connections. That was another video that I shot. There'll be a link to that as well. So I would encourage you to look at these, and if there's something more you want to learn about them, drop me a comment. I would also offer there are critics of this, and the main criticism is people say, well, this is so overlapping. It's not like things are discrete, they're overlapping. I find that to be a strength of this, and that's when I created my learning molecule, is that was all the layering and twisting and like a dog chasing its tail kind of idea, and I found that to be really quite helpful. So, again, this is something to dive into, or if there's enough here for you to really leverage for yourself, or leverage for yourself in terms of aging confidently, this whole notion of better, wiser, kinder, great, use it. All right, freedom and flexibility. Again, you can stop here, read this, and find your own way of writing it down for yourself or exploring it. I'm going to offer some thoughts for you to see what might unfold for you. This whole notion of freedom and flexibility, I learned flexibility in probably a different kind of way. I was involved with the International Red Cross in Africa dealing with a war situation. And I ended up in the capacity as air operations coordinator for the relief aircraft. And what I had to do is make sure that the correct material from the warehouse came out on the correct trucks that went to the correct plane, took off at the correct time, went to the correct airport. Everything had to be correct to be able to make sure that things got delivered. And I learned in there, and it was made very clear by the head of delegation. He said, patience, flexibility, and discretion. You got to be patient because things don't always work the way that you would hope. Flexibility in meeting the situations as they present themselves. And discretion is don't speak ill of anyone. And so this patience, flexibility, and discretion is sort of woven into my fabric now. And when I connect it with freedom, then there is a wonderful story that starts to shape my life and my desires and my timing, and to do so without any limitations. And that's kind of an interesting way of looking at it, because as I'm aging confidently and I'm seeing these years that are unfolding for me, I don't want to place a whole bunch of limitations around me. And so I'm not going to get into some rigid schedules or external obligations. Now, hitting certain timelines for these videos going out, I get it. I have to do that. And there are writing times that I have to hit as well, but not in the senses that every day must be like this. There is freedom that I seek in my days around even going outside and going for walks. So it gives me an opportunity to remind myself freedom to explore. And through creative expression, I mentioned my doodle pads and being able to play with them and finding other ways in which to um, share what's happening in my life and with you through these videos, my interests, my hobbies, the paths forward. One of the things that I'm really looking forward to doing, and I've had these conversations with many of the others. You may have heard me talk about Walter and Lone and Panay, and having conversation about what paths are we following, and being very particular about the use of the word paths, not a road map, it's a path map. It's not a highway, it's a pathway kind of idea, and being very particular about our language. In other words, being a little bit more flexible. So when we make our decisions about what we want to bring forth, it aligns with our personal values, our hierarchy of values. And that is something that if you can find a way in which to get that freedom and flexibility up for yourself, this whole notion of aging confidently, this better, wiser, kinder, starts to become present for you. And then what I started to go with is living legacy life. And there's this notion of standard of living, the experiences of legacy, and the quality of life. And these became important terms for me, and I'm going to make a separate video about bringing those to the foreground because there's something that I found in my conversations with these top of mind issues, questions that people have. And I was digging in, which is why there is this 6-part video series. This is video number 5, so look for the other ones as well. Is people were expressing, and I don't always use this term, but this is a quick summary. They were talking about the fear of living, the fear of legacy, the fear of life. And I went, that's kind of interesting. The use of that term is that there was something that they saw that might happen in the future that would cause them more pain than pleasure in their living, in their legacy involvement, in their life as a whole. This standard of living, experiences of legacy, this quality of life. And I found that fascinating that that was actually happening. And I said, okay, this whole series of videos that I'm shooting, this whole story of living a legacy life, there's something here for those 50, 60, 70. And it just spurred me on more to be able to think about, well, what kind of workshops and courses and books do I want to write? And therefore, I'm just going to enjoy what becomes what I call the Living Legacy Life platform and the Legacy Mastery, Legacy Accelerator, Legacy Agora, Legacy Decoded, just looking at different ways in which to make this happen for us. Therefore, navigating shift, the creative expression, freedom, and flexibility become very important concepts with associated practices. And I hope I've given you a little bit of an introduction to that in this video so that you might be able to pull it forward in some ways that make sense for you. I'm going to wish you well in navigating your life shifts with this creative freedom that's possible in your 50s, 60s, and 70s. So take care.